IDW Sonic issue 48. It starts out pretty boringly because we see a text bubble from someone who talks on the radio, which has nothing that's actually worth reading. Who knows what kind of advice he gives people? This isn't the beginning that hooks me. Vector drives his car to the radio station where Charmy was being babysat there by the owl of all people. I assume the Chaotix being poor somehow means that they can't afford to hire a babysitter. But this guy's a random choice. I still feel like the story is wasting my time as the owl says Charmy's a natural at helping fix people's problems, despite being a little kid. But who knows what those problems were? Maybe it would have been more interesting and impressive if the writer cared enough to reveal what those problems and the advice for them was. And had that scene at the end of the story where we're already hooked. Instead he gets tired and Vector thanks him for watching him. But why did he watch him? I never knew he was close friends with the Chaotix. Espio says he was returning Charmy's library books, and Charmy's been banned for life, but would be upset if he was told about it, because apparently, Charmy really likes books now. That's nice. The owl, who still doesn't have enough personality for me to remember his name, says there's a case for the Chaotix because he got some calls during the show for Central City. Oh, the plot's finally picking up! Why couldn't the story have started with Espio in the car on its way to a new mission? How did the writer not realize how boring that scene was? The Chaotix got a case about power outages and traffic problems. I've read Imposter Syndrome. I already know what caused them. It'd have been more creative if the writer thought up a case for them that was entirely unrelated, and they just happened to discover what Surge did on the way. Instead it's a mystery where the audience already knows the big reveal. Espio says Knight led them into trouble before, and trouble doesn't get them paid. That's needlessly depressing. Vector wants reward money for solving the case, and he doesn't want to miss out on another case because of traffic. So he tells Charmy to fly him and the Chaotix out of there for some ice cream, abandoning his car to be towed in the process. Doesn't he realize he'd probably have to spend more money on the car getting towed and the ticket than he might get for solving the case? Someone yells at them for cheating, and Vector eventually gets told about the electrical surge that caused the traffic signals to change at random and lights to flicker. I know. I wish the story started here. Someone with clearly bad-looking eyes says that he knows who caused the surge and is someone who came out of the sewer. Why did he say it was a crocodile? Thankfully, this doesn't lead to a mob of angry people running after Vector, and instead they decide to climb down the ladder into the absurdly spacious sewer. They hear a splash, and after wasted time, Vector throws Charmy and scares someone. They run after someone in the dark. They think it stinks and run away from some stink gas. Oh, so it's rough? The silhouette looks like Fang, but that's just wishful thinking. They find something he dropped when he ran, and it's a crate full of scrap metal from the shipping yard. So they go there, where the buildings are covered in this annoying pink shading just because of the time of day. Then Espio says the smell followed them or something, and Vector realizes they could follow the trail of it to an abandoned building. Espio hears voices there and smartly goes invisible, and climbs up the wall like a Knuckles Chaotix, where he eventually finds out that Ruff and Tumble are working for a bad-looking green character, who says their one route for moving cargo is gone because they can't go out of the city that way again. He says that this is everything he could salvage from his house before all of his property was confiscated and he's stuck here with no way to get out. I assume he had a lot of taxes he didn't pay, like the family at the start of Schitt's Creek. Espio leans over a metal railing and makes a noise, which is very unprofessional for a ninja. So the bad-looking character from an earlier story hears him and tries to shoot him. Vector breaks down the door, Ruff has some annoying dialogue, and Vector's dialogue somehow manages to be a lot worse. I obviously wanted to see him punch them, not see him start rapping. He was so annoying that I'm glad he got slammed to the floor. You know who also wrote Vector to start rapping at the wrong time? Penders. And he did it for a way shorter amount of time. So Vector gets punched for being annoying. And SBO says these three had nothing to do with the power failures. Go figure. The bad-looking character doesn't remind me of his name when he's asked who he is. Apparently he's supposed to be old, so that's another reason his design sucks, because I never knew that. He says that his home was trashed by some heroes, and he makes an unrealistic, stilted speech that he wants to trick more heroes. He eventually says that there's always someone looking for weapons. Vector tells SBO to stand back and smacks the floor to cause some damage, creating a hole that sends all of the guy's stuff away. That was epic. Then the bad guy shows SBO some yellow balls and asks if they belong to him. What are they? He throws them and they turn out to be smoke bombs. Yeah, they really looked like smoke bombs, alright. So he makes their escape with smoke bombs. But Ruff can create gas too. So he could have easily created some gas long before this to make an escape. And for some reason, Clutch wants the Chaotix to spread the word that he's back, even though he wants to hide from the police. Not get them looking for him again. Who would name their kid Clutch? It's so forgettable, of course I forgot the name. So the story ends here with the Chaotix still not knowing who messed up the city. Are you serious? All of that wasted my time. This story was by Evan Stanley, and I found it incredibly boring because its pacing was too slow. Not only does it have a tedious beginning, where I wonder why it was that way, but the Chaotix get given a case, but instead of it being a creative new case, it's just them trying to figure out who caused the power outages when we already know that it's Surge. And they don't even find out it's her by the end. Instead, they get told to go to the sewers and eventually track down Ruff, and learn that Ruff and Tumble are working for that awful looking character Clutch, who looks so bad that I can't enjoy any of the panels he's in. He doesn't even tell me why his property was confiscated and he had to start hiding here. So what was the point of showing me these characters I hate again? Obviously the only reason people would want to see Ruff and Tumble and him again is if they'll get slapstick. And they don't. Instead, Vector embarrasses the comic by rapping, and I get to see him get slapstick. Okay, that was a waste of time. I thought this issue would be about Sonic following the Motabug after it got taken over by Dr. Starline and getting into trouble along the way, going through various different settings. Why even have a story about the Chaotix if it's gonna be like this? I'd rather see them solve an actual mystery. IDW Sonic, issue 49. Belle tells Tails that Motabug's non-aggression subroutine is isolated, and the wireless broadcast is primed. So she sends a signal at some robots that were sitting there still with no explanation for why the heroes could put cables in them just fine without getting hurt and having to damage them. Tails pulls a rope and pulls a cloth off Sonic. The robots aren't interested in attacking him, and eventually, Sonic says he wants to have some tacos with Tails for lunch, which is something new at least. So that was the worthwhile part of the scene. The rest of it was just confusing. It's not like the robots were heading towards the heroes to attack them and all of a sudden they got the nicest beam sent at them. Belle pets and nuzzles against the Motabug, and eventually, we see Sonic asleep on the couch of all places with a book. It's nice to see that he reads books, but the artist was too lazy to give the book a name to tell us what he was reading. The Motabug tries to get out of the room and tries to attack Sonic. Tails got woken up in the middle of the night, and that was before the crashing sound. Then they see Belle saying that she has to get out, and the way she's talking gives away that she has no free will. As does the fact that she has differently colored eyes just because of that. So Tails figures out what happened, and as usual when a hero tells someone to fight it, it's pointless. Sonic tells Tails to try to whip up something to fix this while he'll buy time. She pulls her own tail and kicks the bookshelf to send Sonic off it. It's more exciting to see him try to fight in a house for once and have trouble because it's so cramped. The Motabug trips him. Tails apologizes because it's gonna hurt and shocks her. She conveniently wakes up right away, able to walk. And he says he had that prototype SETI zapper left over to stop the wireless signals from going in or out. She warns him that all the robots are being summoned somewhere, and wants to yell at Eggman for it. So she tells them where to go, and eventually, they see some people in a vehicle with someone wanting to blast their way through. Sonic tells the civilians to go hide in a house rather than bother the robots. It turns out they've done nothing but follow the robots for hours in the same location. And I wonder why Sonic's got spinny feet when the Eggpod and Tails are just walking like they're at normal speed. Tails starts flying ahead and spots the city. Belle says they should put the zapper on Motobug instead, and Tails says that they can't because as soon as it'll be off her, she'll be vulnerable to the signal again. She says she's been studying its construction and might be able to cut Motobug's power. And the heroes worry that she won't be able to turn it back on for no reason. Sonic and Tails have to fight off some robots because suddenly now they want to fight them instead of being forced to walk towards the beacon like before. Belle finds a letter in the Motobug of all things from Mr. Tinker for her, which says that he's a captive of Starline and apologizes for being Eggman. So that's nice, but needlessly sad, and we know he'll never be turned back into Mr. Tinker anyways. So a page is wasted after that until Sonic reassures her, talking too much, stating the obvious, much like that letter did. I'd rather the plot progress, which it hasn't really done. Sonic runs off with Tails in her, and the story ends with us seeing the tower. That was it? There was barely any plot in that! This story by Evan Stanley felt like it contributed nothing at all, aside from explaining that Tails used the SETI zapper to make Belle immune to Starline's signal. I read Imposter Syndrome, so I already know that Starline sent out a beacon for all of the robots, and I already saw Sonic follow Motobug. So I could have assumed this story happened off screen. At least I got to see Sonic tell some civilians to go to safety. But otherwise, all that happened in over 20 pages was that they followed some robots for hours. They randomly decided to fight Sonic after all the time of just ignoring him to follow the beacon. And Belle wastes my time reading a letter that states the obvious. There wasn't much of a plot here. I felt empty when I got to the end, and I couldn't believe how many pages the story went through. At least it wasn't as boring as the last issue. But I thought these two issues would matter. Not have Sonic merely go through a forest. I guess I was expecting more creativity there. IDW Sonic, issue 50. As Sonic's running towards the beacon, Belle thanks Sonic for saying it's not too late to sit this one out, and Starline says to send Surge at them. Why are we being shown an entire page of this? Why is he calling them doppelgangers when they aren't called Sonic and Tails and don't look like them? Starline gets told by a robot, apparently, who still cares enough to call him Doctor, that he's in a seat. A missile gets shot through the room. Starline makes himself fast and strong to jump and punch what turns out to be a mecha instead, saying that he hoped it'd never come to this because he didn't want to embarrass Eggman. Belle sees Metal Sonic lying on the floor, and the heroes failed to learn their lesson because Belle wants to fix him, and says that she couldn't save Motobug. That doesn't make any sense. Why wouldn't she just turn a robot back on after cutting its power? She could just repair its wire, and then send energy into it again. It was always predictable that something might happen to Motobug, making its role in the comic pointless. But since it wasn't completely destroyed, its so-called death scene had no impact, because it didn't come off as something that it'd never be able to be repaired from. It came off as no different than turning off a computer. Sonic says he understands. Tails lampshades his stupidity, and Sonic apparently runs away because he doesn't want to hear him tell him off. He's nicer to Metal Sonic than Sonic was to Shard and Archie. Then Tails gets attacked by water, and Belle gets approached by some robots. I'm glad they were separated from each other to give the battle some actual tension. Kit has some boring dialogue that thankfully keeps it short, talking like he's a robot with no free will because he's accepted that he was brainwashed. Logically, why wouldn't he have just started drowning Tails instantly instead of wasting time introducing himself while letting him talk first? That'd buy him time. Then we see that Surge is holding Sonic while running ahead. So as I expected, she was all talk and didn't really want to kill Sonic more than she wanted to hit him a lot of times. Because obviously if she really wanted to kill him more than anything else, she'd have grabbed and shocked him to death with a single touch, like she did to Metal Sonic. She might as well not have electricity powers at all with how she'll be written. And it wouldn't come off as sloppy if they acknowledged it or said that she was out of electricity every time she tried to fight Sonic. But if Supersonic and Fleetway made himself make sense because he said he likes to play with his food and is afraid of killing Sonic too quickly, it could make some sense that she's the same way. Starline just made her hate him too much and was stupid to keep her free will. Sonic gets thrown at something and Surge says that all she knows is who he is. She says she's his fault and takes a dumb risk of telling her enemy that she's gonna get back at Starline and Eggman when she wants Starline to think that she's really loyal to him and Sonic's just gonna tell on her. She says it really comes down to him and is right when she says that if he had just taken out Starline and Eggman time, she wouldn't have been made the way she is. It's also Starline's fault. I don't know why she's mad at him for keeping on fighting when she hates Eggman and Starline. So she'd want him to keep making them suffer, not quit. She calls him out on his stupidity, calling Starline and Eggman idiots, and says she'll end everything. It makes no sense that she'd do that to the world in general though, because that's not what Starline programmed her for. Sonic's written to look like an idiot because all he does is say that maybe he spoke too fast and reintroduce himself. And what's going on? Are they just running around? I guess she's running after him? This panel sucks at showing me what's going on and just shows them multiple times at once. Issues like this make me miss the days when panels were always squares that were separate from each other. You'd think she'd hit him, but I guess he's just avoiding her. Why is Eggman being allowed to just talk in his mecha? Well, that's because Starline is hiding. I thought he would keep smacking it. He wants to get to the hangar to get a mecha of his own to hit his, when he could very easily just attack him with the power and run away with speed. Obviously, a mecha would have a harder time hitting a smaller target, but he's too scared to do that. Isn't it obvious that audiences would rather see the actual characters get smacked around instead of seeing giant mechas fight like it's Transformers? I never know what damage will be too much, so I don't have a reason to care about what happens to either mecha. The fight will just end when the plot demands. Belle brought Metal Sonic to a hiding place as I wonder if she kicked the robots she saw to death to get here. She says she's almost done, and says she'll act as a router and use the Zeddy Zapper to block Starline's control signal on him. She turns him on. See, what did she just do that for that Motobug? I'm sure she repaired Metal's wires too. Then she says he's still a killer robot by default, as if she's somehow surprised at that. She says she can access his files because they're connected. She reads his mind to find out that he recognizes that she's made by Eggman, even though she looks nothing like one of Eggman's robots at all. And his connection to the Eggnet lets him know where to find Eggman. She says she can't let him out of her range, so she follows him into an elevator as I'm thinking about how convenient it is that he's not attacking her. I guess he was conveniently never briefed on the fact that she's on Sonic's side because she's not fighting much. Oh, how convenient. Tails isn't being held by the Water Tails anymore. But they can turn into ice at will. Why wouldn't they have grabbed both of his tails? He flies away and admits even at a time like this that his control over them is impressive. He stuns him by saying that he hasn't seen that kind of tech in a while, and his gear looks much cooler. I know he loves technology, but he could get attacked at any moment. Kid's quiet for a bit looking away, because he's not used to being complimented, and he says it's not his. Tails flatters him for being skilled, and it's lampshaded. Tails wishes they could find some common ground instead, saying that his talents are unique, and he bets that not everyone appreciates that uniqueness. He relates him on being different and says that his friends get him through it. This is taking good advantage of Tails being a nice, naive kid. He says he doesn't need friends, as if he doesn't think of Surge as a friend. Maybe he knows he's lying to Tails and is just defensive. He says he's fine with competitive rivalry too, and he tells Tails not to ask him what he wants because Surge isn't here, so he doesn't know. But he would know what he wants because he still remembers what Surge wants. So this sure is convenient. When Tails asks to join him because his throat is sore from shouting, and he wants to call a truce until they've got the facts sorted out, Kit withdraws his water, and Tails thanks him, and gets told Starline summons them, and Tails asks if Starline hurt him. Kit says Starline hurt him a lot and made him forget. I guess he's referring to every time Starline fought with him and Surge after they found out how he made them. He says Starline made him happy he got hurt. No, he didn't. He says he hates Starline and wants to stop him with Tails' help. Tails says they should find Sonic, and then Kit gets mad and his eyes glow, and he says Surge has to destroy Sonic. So that was a waste of her time then. But since all that's happening in terms of action is the most unengaging stuff imaginable, like two spin dashers hitting each other without us even seeing the impact, this scene needed to happen to give the story anything at all. Because I thought it'd be about Surge and Sonic's fight. But I'm not seeing a fight. Sonic hopes Surge is having fun too, which makes no sense. She says he's not supposed to be having fun, and he says he's used to fights and people with her goal. She says it's who she is, not a shtick. It is a shtick if more than one person has it, clearly. He wants to give her a chance to rebound, as he's suddenly standing on some higher brown area above her. He's called out as naive, and he says he wants her to keep having fun in the world like everyone else, and wants to make peace with her because he did with Knuckles. She says the world rejected her for no reason out of nowhere. She says if she volunteered to work for Starline, she had nothing good going on in her life. What makes her assume that she volunteered? She says that if he kidnapped her, nobody has tried to find her yet. How would she think she knows for sure? For all she knows, she's never been anywhere that the people she used to know were in. We don't get to see Sonic's chew impact her, and I waited forever for this. Why should I care about the fight? It's mostly just them moving around. I hope I never see a so-called fight like this again. Surge doesn't need to be in this comic if this is all I have to look forward to. Just the same two things over and over again. Scourge was a lot more interesting than her, because I was always figuring out that he wasn't as evil as he could be. There were over 24 times when he didn't kill someone. This character's a lot more unlikable when she's faced with Sonic by comparison. So the story had some more redundant padding until eventually Starline uses a Tricore Blast. But Eggman's fine because plot armor says in front of him that he knew he'd deplete his power reserves. Lucky for them, they're both alive after the mechas exploded, because they had rings. He tries to brainwash him, but Eggman explains that he made himself immune to that. And not the metal virus. So now he has a brain. Then after he slams Starline into the floor, Belle calls him father even though he's nothing like Mr. Tinker anymore. Also, you'd think she'd have called him dad because it's more informal. She says she found his letter. She says she's come to say goodbye and that she has to move on. She calls him Sir for some reason and says she fixed Metal Sonic. It is smart of her to try to do the opposite of provoke him to increase her chances of escaping him when she's alone with him. Metal could just be sent after her at any time. There's a loud rumble sound, and Eggman wonders how she bypassed the control signal. She says she used herself as a secure router, interfacing with his coding directly. Eggman wastes time asking her to join him. Why is any character written to do this cliche when they know it was a waste of time? It sure is convenient for her that Eggman doesn't send Metal Sonic to kill her right now, even if he does want to reward her for inconveniencing Starline. He could just make a robot that's a great mechanic, so he doesn't need her. Then something falls and she tells Starline to move it, because the street is caving in. He sits there whining and calls himself a failure and disgrace instead of getting up and saving himself. And you'd think Belle would try to save him if she's naive enough to save Metal Sonic. Tails gets distracted by something below him and gets hit by a high-pressure water wave. Kit then runs out of water because apparently that can happen, and Tails sneaks up behind him and goes to turn his pack off. For no reason, Tails trails off really quickly in the middle of his second sentence and hopes he didn't kill him. At least we see Sonic's chew impact Surge once. What a compliment. Eventually, Surge is hanging on to something and is about to fall into a hole. Sonic apologizes and wants to haul her out, and she grabs the idiot ball and shocks him to get the last hit before she falls. Now, you'd think that if she really cared about killing him, like she kept talking like, she'd have made this a lethal execution. Instead, she doesn't even injure him and just lets herself fall. I wonder if the writer has the guts to actually kill her off, or will just have her be fine from a huge fall that the healing factor wouldn't have time to save her from. I'll have to assume she had rings. Maybe she knows that her healing factor will save her. I guess she just wants to mess with him. Conveniently, Kit seems unconscious as Tails flies holding him, and Sonic tells Tails that Surge was lost. Belle says that she modified the badnik that was about to attack her so that it wouldn't hurt Sonic, but it was oddly friendly to her. Sadly, she's interrupted after she says about that, and then Eggman calls them, and they get threatened by a bunch of robots that can all die in one hit. How scary. Sheer numbers doesn't make them have a chance of winning. This story by Ian Flynn was about Surge falling into a hole after doing nothing but having her attacks dodged chasing Sonic, with the two only exchanging a few hits. Not nearly enough to be satisfying to watch. And meanwhile, Kit gets flattered about his good control over technology on his back that sends water tails out of it. And Tails shows him compassion, getting him to relax, until he gets riled up again at Sonic's name, only to pass out just because Tails turned off his water device, which doesn't make any sense. I liked how Tails was acting. Everyone else in the story was annoying, saying exactly the kinds of stupid things you'd expect. We're supposed to buy that Starline and Surge fell to their deaths, but this isn't a comic that runs on logic. It's a comic that does nothing but reuse the same couple of villains out of laziness. Even the Deadly Six. So while this would be the perfect place to stop using them, they'll keep coming back and being one-dimensional, repetitive antagonists. At least the story wasn't exactly like I expected, because Sonic and Tails weren't facing Surge and Kit together. But of course the story had Surge not electrocute Sonic once, when she could kill him with a single touch. And while it's easy to assume she wants him around to keep hitting, and it's just all talk, or maybe he's waiting until she gets exhausted enough that she'd want to end the fight, Sonic never establishes this to be the case. And she should know that she doesn't want him dead by now if she won't even shock him enough to injure him before falling.